I still remember the moment it all shifted. Not with a bang, but with the soft click of a coffee machine. It was Tuesday, 7:43 a.m. I was the only one in the break room, adding oat milk to my Americano. My usual. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. The kind of quiet that usually meant a good day ahead. That's when Camille walked in. She didn't say good morning. She didn't even look at me. She just stood there in her crisp navy suit, flipping through her phone like I wasn't there. The new VP of Strategy, imported straight from Boston like some kind of corporate miracle. The ink on her promotion letter wasn't even dry. Without lifting her eyes, she said, "Reese, Nathan needs to see you in his office. Now." Just like that. No smile. No context. No please. Nathan, the president of the company. My boss for 8 years. The man who once told me I was irreplaceable. My hand tightened slightly on the paper cup, but I didn't flinch. I just nodded, tossed my stirrer in the trash, and walked down the long hall toward his corner office. Heels tapping on the polished floor like a metronome counting down. I'd been with the company, Halwell Consulting, for just over 12 years. Joined as a junior analyst, built the West Coast client portfolio from scratch, survived 2 restructurings and 1 hostile merger. My name wasn't on the building, but some of the deals keeping the lights on. But none of that mattered the moment I stepped into Nathan's office. He didn't even offer me a seat. He just stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over downtown Seattle like he was searching for a way to avoid saying it. "We're going in a new direction, Reese." It wasn't even an apology. I stared at him. "What direction is that?" He sighed. "Camille feels it's time for fresh leadership on client operations. She has my full support." Blinked stunned. "Camille feels." She'd been here 4 weeks? "You're letting me go?" Yes. He nodded. "We'll frame it as a mutual transition. We'll give you a generous package. No hard feelings. No hard feelings." He was already turning away before I could answer, like I was some out-of-date software being quietly uninstalled. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I stood tall, thanked him for his time, and left the room with a kind of composure that made people question if they just witnessed a dismissal, or a decision. But inside I was unraveling. By the time I reached the parking garage, the air had thickened with a damp Seattle drizzle, just enough to smudge your windshield but not enough for an umbrella. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, not moving. I wasn't ready to drive, or breathe, or believe that after 12 years, I was just out. I didn't even know where to go. Home. A bar. A lawyer. Instead, I sat there, staring at the office elevator through the rearview mirror, thinking about every late night, every red-eye flight, every weekend I spent rescuing deals instead of resting. I missed my niece's graduation for a contract in Austin. I canceled a vacation when a client got cold feet. I had built this place into something profitable, something respected. And I was replaced with a LinkedIn connection from Boston who hadn't even learned our CRM yet. I was humiliated, but not angry. Not yet. I drove home in silence, ignoring the 3 Slack messages that still pinged my phone out of habit. One from Derek in finance. One from Maya on the Denver account. One from Camille, surprisingly. "Please return your badge and company laptop by end of day. HR will coordinate." Cold. Efficient. Predictable. I dropped my phone face down on the couch and stared at the ceiling. My apartment felt too clean. Too still. Like it hadn't gotten the memo that my life had just imploded. That night I couldn't sleep. My brain was chewing on every detail. Why so sudden? Why now? We were just weeks away from finalizing the BerkTech integration. A $42 million deal that I had nursed through 3 rounds of negotiations and one hell of a CEO who hated consultants. No one knew that account better than me. Except, maybe that's exactly why I was cut loose. Because someone wanted the credit. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went for a run. Cap pulled low, music loud, lungs burning, trying to outpace the questions in my head. But they chased me down anyway. Why would Camille push me out before the Birktech signing? That deal was the biggest feather in the company's cap this year. Ugh. Unless she thought she could close it herself. But there was something she didn't know. Something I had made sure was written into the contract draft after the Belridge fiasco 2 years ago. Something that could change everything. There was a clause. A very specific clause. And Camille hadn't been there long enough to know it even existed. My pace slowed. My heart didn't. That's when I realized. She hadn't just blindsided me. She'd made a mistake. Very expensive one. And I wasn't done yet. By 8:10 a.m. I was at my dining table, laptop open, coffee untouched. My hands moved on muscle memory. Login VPN internal contract folder. I still had access. That was their first mistake. I found it under Birktech, draft final C3.docs. An ironic file name, considering what was about to happen. I scrolled, slowly, carefully, past the executive summaries and the risk matrix. Through pages of revisions, clauses, indemnifications. Then there it was. Section 14.2. Authorized representation. All final stage negotiations, modifications, and binding commitments related to the Birktech integration shall be conducted exclusively by Reese Calloway, VP of Client Operations. No other party shall be recognized as authorized representative without written amendment co-signed by both companies' legal counsel. I leaned back in my chair. Exhaled. It was airtight. They couldn't close the deal without me. Not legally. Not ethically. Not even logistically. Birktech's CFO was notoriously rigid about compliance. He'd flagged inconsistencies over font formatting in the past. There was no way he'd sign anything that didn't include my signature, especially after 6 months of relationship building. Camille hadn't read the fine print. Nathan clearly hadn't either. They'd pushed me out thinking I was just another name on a spreadsheet. But I was the key holder. And they just locked themselves out. The rush of it hit me slow, like heat rising through the floorboards. Not revenge. Not smugness. Control. For the first time in 24 hours, I wasn't the one who'd been blindsided. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. I let it ring. Then voicemail. Then another call, this time from Maya. Picked up. Reese, she whispered. Do you know what's going on? Camille just tried to lead the Birktech call. They shut it down. Said they won't continue until you're back on the line. My lips parted slightly. And Camille looked stunned. Like she didn't understand why. Nathan stepped in, tried to smooth it over, but Burke's GC cut him off. He literally said, Reese Calloway or no deal. Understood. My body felt calm, but my pulse was drumming in my ears. Anything else? Yes. Yeah. Maya hesitated. Camille just stormed into Nathan's office. And they closed the door. I walked to my window, staring out at the water below. This wasn't over. Not even close. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't fired. I was essential. And they were about to learn that the hard way. It was 9:27 a.m. when the call came. Nathan. His name flashing across my screen like a mistake trying to undo itself. I stared at it. One ring. Three. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the follow-up, a text. Reese, would appreciate a quick chat. There's been a misunderstanding. Please call me. A misunderstanding. That word again. Always the corporate translation for. We screwed up, but we're hoping you'll fix it quietly. I didn't respond. At 9:38 my phone buzzed again. Camille. I hadn't even saved her number. Hi Reese. I believe there's been some confusion around the Birktech transition. We'd love to have you back in to discuss the best way to move forward. We'd love to have you back. Not we're sorry. Not you were right. Just another calculated sentence, strung together by someone used to getting what they want by pretending it was their idea. I didn't answer that one either. Instead I sat down, opened a new note in my phone and typed 3 words. They need me. Then I added. But I don't need them, not like this. By 10:12 a.m., Maya texted again. Things are spiraling. Burktech cancelled the midday call completely. Nathan's in panic mode. Legal is scrambling. Everyone's asking where you are. I felt it in my chest. Not pride, not satisfaction. Validation. But that didn't mean I was going to run back and save them like nothing had happened. At 11:04, another name lit up my phone. Adrian Cole. Howell's general counsel. Someone I respected, and who'd always played things straight. Answered. Her voice was calm but tight. Reese. Can we talk? I didn't say yes. I just waited. The Burktech clause, she continued. We reviewed it this morning. It's enforceable. Without your signature, the deal doesn't close. They won't even move to phase 2. I know, I replied. Silence. Then, Nathan would like to meet. This afternoon, if you're available. I looked out the window again. The rain had stopped. My reflection stared back at me. Not shaken, not tired. Teddy. Tell him, I said. I'll consider it. But only under specific conditions. Adrian didn't push. She didn't need to. She knew what that meant. For the first time in 12 years, I was no longer playing defense. I had the leverage. Facts. To come. And I had no intention of handing any of it over for free. I arrived at Howell's main office just after 1 p.m. Not through the employee entrance. I walked in through the front lobby like a guest. Like someone who had nothing to prove and everything under control. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. Ms. Calloway, they said. I'm here to meet with Adrian Cole and Nathan Trent, I said, voice even. You can let them know I've arrived. She fumbled slightly, nodded, then picked up the phone. As I waited, I looked around. Nothing had changed. The same wall of awards, the same abstract sculpture in the corner, the same smell of designer coffee and artificial calm. And yet everything had changed. I wasn't the one being called into an office anymore. I was the one deciding whether I'd even walk in. Adrian greeted me personally. She led me down the hall without speaking. Just a quiet glance, like she knew the weight of what this meeting meant. When we reached Nathan's office, he was already standing, hands folded tightly in front of him. Camille was there too, sitting to the side, posture perfect, face unreadable. Nathan motioned to a chair across from his desk. I didn't take it. I looked him in the eye. Before I agree to anything, I want clarity. This isn't a return. This is a negotiation. His mouth twitched like he wanted to argue, but Adrian raised a hand, a subtle gesture that silenced him. Understood, she said. I laid it out clean. Full authority over the Burktech integration, start to finish, written into a revised contract. Restoration of my role, title and benefits, retroactive to the day they cut me loose. No interference from Camille or her office during the remainder of the integration phase. A private, documented acknowledgement of the mistake made. Not public, not humiliating but official. On record. And finally, respect. Going forward, I said, I would not tolerate being dismissed, sidelined or undercut by anyone. Not again. Nathan shifted in his seat. That's a lot to ask. I tilted my head. No. It's exactly what I'm worth. Adrian turned to him. It's reasonable. And it's legal. More importantly, she looked at Camille. It's necessary. Silence stretched. Then Nathan nodded. Agreed. I finally sat down. Good, I said, folding my hands. Then let's get to work. As I left his office 15 minutes later, the hallway was no longer just a hallway. It was a runway. People looked up. Conversations paused. And there, just beyond the glass conference room, Camille stood stiffly, arms crossed. Eyes met. I didn't glare. I didn't smirk. I didn't even blink. I just walked past her like a storm moving through. Untouchable. Because I hadn't returned for revenge. I had returned to reclaim what was mine, on my terms. The first week back felt like walking through fog. Nothing looked different, but everything was. People smiled, but not quite the same way. Conversations stopped a second too quickly when I passed. And Camille. She had vanished behind meetings and travel obligations. The BerkTech team, however, was steady. Professional. They welcomed my return like flipping a switch. The deal rolled forward like it had never stalled, because in their eyes it hadn't. I was their point of contact, and nothing else mattered. But inside Halwell's walls, something had shifted. Or maybe it had just come into focus. It started with my expense reimbursement. The hotel from the Denver client visit, flagged as non-compliant. Then it was a contract draft that I'd reviewed suddenly returning with unauthorized edits I hadn't made. Then 2 days later, I was CC'd on an email that made my blood run cold. An overseas partner had received a message from my email address. The file attached. Incorrect pricing structure. A misalignment that could have tanked a months-long negotiation. Thankfully, he forwarded it to me directly with a short note. This doesn't look like your usual attention to detail. Just double-checking. I hadn't sent it. I hadn't even touched that file. I alerted our internal systems team immediately. They ran a trace. No external breach. The login had come from a shared terminal. In office. That night I stayed late. Everyone else gone. Always dim. I sat alone in one of the glass conference rooms, staring at the city lights bleeding through the windows. I knew this game. I'd seen it before. Back when I was 26 and working under a VP who used subtle sabotage like a scalpel. Never anything direct. Just enough to cast doubt. To seed the idea that maybe you were the problem. But I wasn't 26 anymore. And I wasn't going to shrink just because someone else couldn't stand the fact that I didn't break the first time. The next morning I started documenting everything. I made screenshots, backed up email headers, logged timestamps, even kept a handwritten notebook, something off-network, private. I kept my tone neutral in every reply. No accusations, no emotion, just receipts. Because in a company like this, paper trails matter more than feelings. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I walked past a partially closed meeting room and heard it. My name. Paused just outside the door. It was Camille. She's unpredictable now. Honestly, I'm not sure she can handle the pressure anymore. You've seen it. The tension, the overreactions. She's cracking. Another voice, unfamiliar. Probably someone from finance or HR. But the BerkTech deal. Camille cut him off. She got lucky. That doesn't make her executive material. I stepped back quietly. Cold washed over my skin. This wasn't just cleanup anymore. It was war. Camille had failed to stop me once. Now she was doing what people like her always do. Shifting the narrative. Not Reese is smart. Not Reese saved the deal. But Reese is unstable. If she couldn't discredit my work, she'd try to discredit me. I returned to my office. Closed the door. But still. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was focused. Because I knew exactly what she was doing. And I also knew something else. She wasn't working alone. The audit was never part of my plan. But when Adrian knocked on my office door one morning with a folder in hand and a look I hadn't seen before, tight-lipped, serious, I knew something had tipped. There've been irregularities, she said. Related to me? I asked, already knowing. She nodded. We're launching a limited internal review. Privately. Discreetly. 2 days later, I was called into conference room B, neutral ground. The kind of room they use when no one wants to meet in anyone else's territory. Adrian was there. So was IT. Or a systems analyst I'd never met. I sat across from them, calm. The lead analyst pulled up an activity log. Over the last 3 weeks, we've traced 7 login events under your credentials from shared terminals on floors 2 and 3. Each instance was manually entered. Not saved, not automated. Someone typed your info in. I said nothing. Just waited. We also identified unauthorized access to document versions associated with BerkTech and the Chariot files. Some were modified, others forwarded. All activity ties back to user accounts linked to Camille Daltrey's executive assistant. He paused. It was internal. There it was. Undeniable. Digital. Documented. Not a hunch. Not hearsay. Proof. He nodded. Slowly. What now? Asked. Adrian closed her folder. We're informing Nathan today. The board by end of week. I leaned back in my chair. I want to be there. She raised an eyebrow. You're not required. I know. I looked her in the eye. But I'm not hiding anymore. 3 days later, I stood at the far end of the boardroom, across from Nathan, Camille, and 2 members of the executive committee. Camille looked confident, for about 90 seconds, until the first screenshots hit the table, until the logs were read aloud, until the forwarded emails appeared on the projector, each one tied to a timestamp, each one traced back to her team, each one irrefutable. She tried denial first, then confusion, then deflection. None of it landed. Finally, Nathan turned to her, voice low. I asked you once if your ambition would cost us. You said no. He stood. Turns out you were wrong. Camille was suspended that day. Quietly. No big announcement. Just a name removed from the org chart and a box packed with careful hands. The official statement cited misalignment in leadership direction. But everyone in the office knew what had happened. And more importantly, they knew who hadn't broken. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Nathan. He didn't ask to meet in his office. He came to mine. He brought a sealed folder, and this time he didn't try to control the narrative. He just said, You kept this place from falling apart. And you did it without sinking to anyone else's level. I'd like you to step into Camille's role, VP of Strategy, officially, and lead the integration team going forward. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the office. My name finally etched on the glass. I thought about the nights I almost quit, the emails I almost deleted, the notebook full of documentation, the silence I refused to accept. Then I looked at him and said, I'll take it. But only if I get to rebuild this place the way it should have been from the start. He nodded. That's why I came to you. That evening, I stood by the window as the sun slid down behind the skyline. The light stretched long across the floor, soft and golden like a quiet reward. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't begged. I hadn't burned the place down. But I'd made sure no one could pretend I hadn't been here. I stayed calm. I stayed sharp. And I stayed standing. Not every victory looks like fireworks. Some look like a closed door behind a woman who didn't flinch. Some look like silence, the kind that follows truth finally spoken aloud.